The automated smart home alert flashed at 3:15 a.m. Evacuate the premises immediately. Do not trust the man downstairs. So, I ran. The notification glared against the pitch black of my bedroom, a bizarre anomaly in the quiet of our suburban Minneapolis neighborhood. My dad had been up at a secluded cabin near Duluth for a week-long ice fishing trip. He wasn't supposed to be back until Sunday, but the alert on my phone, triggered by our custom home security system he had programmed himself, was screaming a silent, impossible warning. I sat paralyzed. The floorboards directly beneath my room groaned. Someone was pacing in the kitchen. I crept to the top of the carpeted staircase. The house was freezing. The front door was dead-bolted from the inside, but massive snow boots sat dripping by the mat. In the dim green glow of the microwave clock, I saw him. He was standing by the kitchen island, wearing my dad's oversized red flannel, pouring a glass of tap water in complete silence. I only saw his profile for 5 seconds before I ducked back into the shadows. It was him. Same graying beard, same broad shoulders, but my dad is a loud, clumsy guy who slams cabinets. This man moved like a ghost. I snuck into my 10-year-old brother Leo's room, clamping my hand over his mouth before he could startle awake. Dad's alarm system tripped. I whispered into his ear, grabbing his coat. "We are leaving through the basement. Do not make a sound." Leo was terrified, but obedient. We bypassed the kitchen entirely and slid out through the frosted storm doors into the biting Minnesota night. We sprinted 2 blocks through calf-deep snow until we reached an abandoned community center. Only then did I pull out my phone with freezing fingers. I opened the family vehicle tracking app. My dad's truck was sitting in our driveway, but according to the GPS beacon hardwired into his dashboard, the truck was still 150 miles north, completely stationary near the lake cabin. My phone buzzed. Incoming call. Dad. I answered instantly, putting it on mute so he couldn't hear our ragged breathing in the cold. "Hey, Chief." His deep voice rumbled pleasantly through the speaker. "The house alarm just notified me the basement door opened. Are you and Leo all right?" I unmuted. "We're fine. Where are you?" "I'm at the cabin, buddy. It's freezing up here. Did you guys trip the basement sensor?" My blood turned to ice water. I was staring down the street at our house, where a kitchen light was now blazing. The man inside our house had just sent me a text from my dad's iCloud account. "Is the basement door broken? Come upstairs and help me fix it." I spoke into the phone, voice trembling. "Dad, the GPS says you're at the cabin, but someone is in the kitchen right now texting me from your iPad. He looks exactly like you." The line went dead quiet. Then, a low, rasping chuckle echoed through the speaker, a sound my father had never made in his life. "You always were the observant one," the voice said, dropping the warm cadence entirely. It was flat and metallic. "It's a shame you didn't just come down for a glass of water. It would have been painless." "I'm calling the police," I stammered. "They won't find anything," the voice replied smoothly. "By the time they get there, I'll be just a devastated father looking for his runaway boys." I hung up, powered the phone off, and dragged Leo into the shadowed alcove behind the community center's dumpsters. 10 minutes later, the crunching of snow boots echoed down the empty street. We huddled in the darkness behind a rusted snowplow blade. A man was walking under the amber streetlights, sweeping a blinding flashlight beam across the snowbanks. As he passed directly under the light, I saw his face clearly. It was a flawless, terrifying copy of my father. But as he turned the corner toward our hiding spot, I noticed the legs. My father had shattered his right ankle in a snowmobile accident in 2019. He walked with a pronounced heavy limp that he couldn't hide. This man was gliding over the ice with perfect fluid strides. We stayed hidden until dawn finally broke over the suburbs. When I finally turned my phone back on to dial 911, I had a single new voicemail. It wasn't from my dad's number. It was from the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, 3 hours away. "Hello, this is emergency surgical intake. We are trying to reach the emergency contacts for Arthur Pendleton. He was airlifted here 4 days ago after a severe pileup on the interstate. He's been in a medically induced coma since Tuesday." I looked back down the street. The perfect copy of my father was still pacing in the snow, waiting for us. My fingers were entirely numb. The phone felt like a block of ice in my palm. I shoved it deep into my coat pocket and pulled Leo tighter against my side. He was shivering violently now, his teeth clicking together in a rapid, uncontrollable rhythm. It was 7 degrees outside. The sun was barely a gray smudge on the horizon, casting a flat, dead light across the snow-choked streets. We couldn't stay behind the community center. The rusted snowplow blade blocked us from the street, but it offered zero protection from the wind. If the cold didn't kill us, the man with my father's face would. "Leo, listen to me," I whispered, gripping his small, rigid shoulders. "We have to move. Keep your head down. Don't look at him. If he sees us, you run as fast as you can toward the highway. You don't stop for me. Understand?" Leo shook his head, his eyes wide and leaking tears that were freezing to his eyelashes. "I'm not leaving you. You have to," I said, my voice harder than I intended. "But he hasn't seen us yet. We're going to crawl along the fence line until we hit the alley." I peeked around the edge of the rusted metal. The imposter was standing under the traffic light at the corner of Elm and 4th. He wasn't moving. He was just standing perfectly still, his head tilted slightly to the side as if he were listening to the wind. It was the most unnatural thing I had ever seen. My dad was a restless guy. He shifted his weight constantly to take the pressure off his bad ankle. This man stood like a statue carved from ice. I dropped to my hands and knees in the snow. Now, I breathed. We crawled. The snow soaked through my pajama pants instantly, biting into my skin like ground glass. We followed the chain-link fence behind the community center, putting the brick building between us and the intersection. Every time the wind died down, I strained to hear the crunch of boots, expecting him to be right behind us. But there was only the hollow howl of the Minnesota morning. We reached the alleyway and scrambled to our feet. We ran. We didn't stop until my lungs felt like they were bleeding, and Leo stumbled, grabbing his side. We had put at least a mile between us and our neighborhood. We were in a sparse commercial district that bordered the interstate. A neon sign buzzed through the gray morning fog. "Open 24 HRs. It was a laundromat. I pushed the heavy glass door open. The blast of dry, heated air hit us so hard I almost choked. The air smelled intensely of bleach and cheap floral fabric softener. The place was mostly empty, just rows of humming yellow washing machines and a few battered plastic chairs. In the back, a woman in her late 20s was folding a mountain of hotel towels. She looked up when the door chimed. She had dark circles under her eyes and a name tag pinned to her oversized cardigan that read Nadia. She took one look at us and stopped folding. We were a mess. I was in pajama pants and a thin jacket, completely soaked in snow. Leo was crying silently, his lips tinted blue. "Jesus," Nadia said, dropping a towel. She hurried over to us. "What are you two doing out in this? Where are your parents?" "We got locked out," I lied instantly. My voice cracked. "My dad went to work early. The door shut behind us. We just need to warm up." Nadia's eyes darted from my face to Leo's shivering frame. She didn't buy it for a second, but she didn't press. Come here, she said, ushering us toward the back room where a massive industrial radiator was clanking out heat. Sit down. I'll get you some dry towels. We huddled against the radiator. The heat was painful as it returned to my frozen skin, sending thousands of needle-like pricks up my legs. Nadia brought over 2 large, warm towels, fresh from a dryer. I wrapped one around Leo completely, cocooning him. I can call the police for you, Nadia offered softly, pulling her phone from her pocket. Or a relative. No police, I said, a little too loudly. She paused, her thumb hovering over the screen. Her expression tightened. She was calculating what kind of trouble we were running from. An abusive father? A domestic dispute? The reality was so much worse, but I couldn't tell her that. Please, I said, trying to modulate my voice. My dad, he's in the hospital. Rochester, Mayo Clinic. We just found out. That's why we were running outside. We were trying to figure out how to get to him. It was half true. It was the only part of the truth that sounded human. Mayo is 3 hours away, Nadia said quietly. She slipped her phone back into her cardigan. You can't walk there, kid. I know. But I need to call them. My phone died. She hesitated, then pulled her phone back out and unlocked it. She handed it to me. Make it quick. My manager comes in at 6. I took the phone with trembling fingers. I dialed the number from the voicemail I had memorized an hour ago. The phone rang 3 times before an automated system picked up, then routed me to a nursing station. Mayo Clinic, Surgical ICU. This is Caden. A tired male voice answered. I'm calling about Arthur Pendleton, I said, keeping my voice low so Leo wouldn't hear. I'm his son. You left a voicemail. Hold on, please, Caden said. I heard the clacking of a keyboard. Okay, yes, Arthur Pendleton. Are you with an adult, sweetheart? I'm 17. I lied. Just tell me what's happening, Caden sighed, the sound crackling through the receiver. Your father was brought in on Tuesday evening. Multi-vehicle collision on I-35. He suffered severe cranial trauma and internal bleeding. He underwent surgery, but due to the swelling in his brain, the team placed him in a medically induced coma. He's stable, but critical. Today was Saturday. Who has his personal effects? I asked, my voice flat. His phone? His keys? They should be locked in patient storage here. I can have a social worker call you back to arrange. Is his phone there? I insisted. Check the log. There was a long pause. Kid, I can't just leave the desk to check lockboxes. Someone is using his phone, I whispered, panic rising in my throat again. Someone is in my house right now, texting me from his account, and they have his keys. Silence on the other end. I'm sending a social worker and the police to your location, Caden said, his voice suddenly sharp. What address are you at? No. I hung up the phone. I erased the call history from Nadia's phone and handed it back to her. Thank you, I said. She looked at me, her eyes full of pity and suspicion. Is he okay? He's asleep, I said. I sat down next to Leo. He had stopped shivering as violently, his breathing slowing as the heat soaked into him. I leaned my head back against the concrete wall and tried to think. If my dad had been in a coma since Tuesday, the man in my house hadn't just arrived tonight. He had been there. The boots by the door were wet because he had just come inside, meaning he had been coming and going. But the alarm didn't trip until 3:15 a.m. The custom alarm. My dad built it. It wasn't connected to a commercial security company. It was a closed-loop system he wired himself because he didn't trust third-party servers. Evacuate the premises immediately. Do not trust the man downstairs. Who sent that message? My dad couldn't have. He was unconscious in Rochester. The system was entirely local, requiring physical access to the server rack in our basement or admin access from a trusted device. The imposter had my dad's phone, but the imposter wouldn't trigger an alarm warning us about himself. There was a third person in the system, someone who was watching. Headlights swept across the glass front of the laundromat. I flinched, pulling Leo down behind the row of washing machines. A black SUV pulled into the parking lot. The engine cut off. I peered through the gap between a washer and a dryer. It wasn't a police car. It was an unmarked civilian vehicle. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out into the biting wind. He was wearing a heavy dark winter coat. He paused, looking directly at the glowing neon sign of the laundromat. He didn't limp. Nadia, I hissed, scrambling to my feet. Is there a back door? She froze, looking from me to the man walking toward the glass entrance. Just the loading dock in the alley. It's chained. Unchain it, please. Hey, she said, her voice dropping. Who is that? He's going to kill us, I said. I didn't soften it. I didn't have time. Nadia looked into my eyes. She didn't ask another question. She grabbed a ring of keys from her pocket and ran toward the heavy steel door at the back of the room. She shoved a key into the padlock securing the chain. The front door chime rang. Hello? A voice called out. It was my father's voice. Rich, warm, entirely normal. I'm looking for my boys. Have they come in here? I grabbed Leo by the collar of his coat and dragged him behind a massive commercial dryer. The metal was burning hot against my back. I'm sorry. We're closed for maintenance. Nadia's voice rang out, remarkably steady. I heard the heavy clank of the chain dropping away from the back door. I see, my father's voice replied. Footsteps echoed on the linoleum. Slow, deliberate steps. It's just that I tracked my son's phone to this block before it turned off. He's 17. His little brother is 10. They got scared and ran out of the house. It's a misunderstanding, but they're going to freeze to death out there. I haven't seen any kids, Nadia said. I heard the scrape of a plastic chair as she moved to intercept him. You should call the police. I did. He lied smoothly. They're circling the neighborhood, but I know my boys. They'd look for someplace warm, like this. The footsteps stopped. He was in the center of the room. If he walked 10 feet to his right, he would see us huddled behind the dryer. Miss, the voice changed. The warmth vanished. It became that flat, metallic rasp I had heard on the phone. Where are they? I said I haven't seen them, Nadia said, her voice trembling now. You need to leave. I'll just check the back. You can't go back there. I didn't wait. I shoved Leo hard toward the steel door. It was cracked open, revealing the dark, freezing alleyway outside. Go, I mouthed. Leo squeezed through the gap. I followed him, but my jacket snagged on the door latch. The metal tore with a loud, distinct rip. The footsteps in the laundromat broke into a sprint. I ripped the jacket free, throwing my weight against the heavy steel door and slamming it shut just as a heavy impact hit the other side. The door shuddered in its frame. I grabbed the external deadbolt lever and threw it, locking it from the outside. Something pounded against the steel. The metal dented outward with a deafening boom. It was a strike with the force of a sledgehammer. No human could hit a door that hard. Run! I screamed at Leo. We tore down the alley, slipping on black ice, bouncing off the brick walls of the adjacent buildings. The pounding on the door echoed behind us, a relentless, rhythmic thudding that sounded like a machine breaking down a vault. We reached the end of the alley and spilled out onto a 2-lane road. The sky was turning a pale, bruised purple. Traffic was starting to pick up, mostly delivery trucks and snowplows. We blended into the edge of a bus stop, putting a thick plexiglass shelter between us and the alley exit. I was breathing so hard I tasted blood. Leo was clutching my arm, his face buried in my shoulder. 10 seconds later, the man who looked like my father walked out of the alley. He didn't look angry. He didn't look out of breath. He simply stood at the edge of the sidewalk, his head swiveling in precise, mechanical increments, scanning the street. He looked at the bus stop. He looked right at the frosted plexiglass hiding us. Then, a city bus hissed to a stop right in front of us, blocking his line of sight. The doors folded open. The driver, an older man in a thick woolen hat, looked down at us. You getting on or what? I didn't have any money. I pushed Leo up the steps anyway. Please, I said to the driver. We don't have fare. We just need to get away from here. The driver looked at our clothes, looked at the empty street, and sighed. Get to the back. Sit down. We hurried to the very last row. As the bus pulled away, I wiped a circle in the condensation on the window and looked back. The man was still standing at the mouth of the alley. He wasn't watching the bus. He was looking down at his hand. In the pale morning light, I saw that his knuckles were torn completely open from hitting the steel door, but there was no blood. Under the torn skin, something caught the light. It looked like polished chrome. I let the condensation blur the window again and sank back against the vinyl seat. My chest heaved. I looked at Leo. He was staring at his hands, exhausted and in shock. We were safe for the moment, but the bus was only doing a local loop. We were still in Minneapolis. My dad was 3 hours away, hooked to life support, and whoever, or whatever, was wearing his face knew we were in the city. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my dead phone. I stared at the black screen. Evacuate the premises immediately. Do not trust the man downstairs. If my dad didn't send that message, who did? The bus hit a pothole, jarring my teeth. I remembered the night before my dad left for his trip. We were in the basement. He was running diagnostics on the server rack, typing lines of code into a terminal window. He had seemed on edge, jumping when I dropped a wrench on the concrete floor. Just making sure the firewalls are holding, Chief, he had said, forcing a smile. Lot of weird traffic on the network lately. Keep the doors locked while I'm gone, all right? He knew something was coming. He built the alarm system not to keep out burglars, but to watch for this. And if he built a system to watch for it, he must have built a way to stop it. Where are we going? Leo asked, his voice barely a whisper over the rumble of the diesel engine. I looked at the route map above the window. We're going to Dad's office. The ride took 45 minutes. 45 minutes of staring at the frozen streets of Minneapolis, watching the sky lighten into a dull, overcast gray. I kept my eyes fixed on the rearview mirrors, checking every car that turned in behind us, half expecting to see that black SUV. But nothing followed, just salt trucks and early commuters trying to beat the worst of the snow. Leo didn't say a word the entire way. He just gripped the edge of the vinyl seat, his knuckles white, his eyes fixed on the dirty rubber floor mats. Dad worked in a low-slung, ugly brick building in Eden Prairie, sandwiched between a plumbing supply warehouse and a dormant landscaping company. The sign out front just read Pendleton Data Solutions. It wasn't a sprawling tech campus. It was just Dad, 2 junior developers, and a whole lot of heavy-duty cooling units for the private servers he hosted on site. We got off the bus a block away and walked through the snow-packed industrial park. The wind had died down, but the air was still brittle and sharp. We walked around to the back of the building. The parking lot was empty. It was Saturday morning, and the junior devs wouldn't be in. How are we getting in? Leo asked, his breath pluming in the cold. I know his door code, I said. We reached the steel security door at the rear of the building. It had a heavy magnetic lock and a standard alphanumeric keypad. Dad used the same base sequence for everything, just rotating the last 2 digits, depending on the month. It was February. I punched in his birthday, followed by 02. The keypad beeped twice. The light flashed red. Denied. I frowned, my numb fingers clumsy on the keys. I tried 01, in case he hadn't updated it yet. Red light. I tried 03. Red light. It's not working, Leo whispered, glancing back toward the empty street. Hang on. I took off my glove and rubbed my hand to get some feeling back into my fingertips. I stared at the keypad. The numbers 2, 4, 7, and 9 were significantly more faded than the rest. He changed the whole base code. When? Why? Lot of weird traffic on the network lately. He changed it before he left for the cabin. Move over, a voice said. I spun around, throwing my arm out to push Leo behind me. A woman was standing near the edge of the frozen dumpsters. She was wearing a heavy black parka, a lit cigarette pinched between her gloved fingers. She didn't look surprised to see us. She took a long drag, dropped the cigarette into the snow, and crushed it beneath her boot. You're Arthur's kids, she said. It wasn't a question. Who are you? I demanded, backing up against the steel door. She stepped out of the shadow of the brick wall. She had sharp features, dark hair pulled back severely, and cold, assessing eyes. My name is Hester. I work with your dad. Dad only has 2 developers. Guys, I don't write code, Hester said. She walked right past me, stepping up to the keypad. I manage his external contracts, and I clean up his messes. She punched a complex 12-digit sequence into the keypad. The light blinked green, and the heavy magnetic lock disengaged with a loud clack. She pulled the door open and looked at us. You can freeze out here, or you can come inside. But if that thing wearing Arthur's face followed you, we need to get off the street. My stomach dropped. You know about it. I know a lot more than you do, Hester said, holding the door. Get in. We hurried inside. The building was heavily climate-controlled, the air dry and humming with the sound of server racks in the central cooling room. Hester locked the door behind us and immediately threw 3 manual deadbolts that I had never seen on that door before. They looked like retrofitted steel bars. He installed these on Monday, Hester said, noticing my look, right before he left for his fishing trip. He was actually going to the cabin, I said. The GP's tracker. The tracker was spoofed to show him at the lake. Hester interrupted, walking down the carpeted hallway toward Dad's personal office. Arthur never went north. He went south, toward Rochester. He was trying to deliver a physical hard drive to a contact at the clinic. He didn't make it. The pileup, I said, my voice tight. The coma. Hester stopped in front of Dad's office. She looked at me, her expression unreadable. It wasn't an accident. They forced his truck off the interstate. They just didn't finish the job because emergency responders got there too fast. She unlocked Dad's office door with a physical key and pushed it open. The room was completely trashed. Filing cabinets were overturned, papers scattered across the cheap industrial carpet. Dad's desktop computer had been ripped from its cables. The tower smashed open, its internal components stripped bare. The drywall behind his desk had been cut open with a saw, revealing empty space between the wooden studs. They got here Thursday night, Hester said, stepping over a pile of shredded documents. Bypassed the commercial alarm completely. Arthur knew they'd come for the backups, which is why he hid the primary drive. Hid it where? Hester looked at me. Then she looked at Leo. In the basement of your house, connected to your local closed-loop alarm system. I felt physically sick. The pieces clicked together with terrifying speed. That's why it's in our house, I said. The imposter. It needs the drive. It needs the decryption key, Hester corrected, pulling the blinds shut over the small window. The drive is physically hardwired into the server rack in your basement, but it's totally locked down. Arthur built a biometric fail-safe. It requires his physical presence. Or, she let the sentence hang. hang. She looked at me again. Or his direct bloodline, I finished, the horror settling deep in my chest. Me, or your brother, Hester said quietly. That's why it texted you. That's why it wanted you to come downstairs. It didn't want to kill you. It wanted to use you to unlock the drive. What is it? Leo asked. His voice was shaking again, though the room was warm. The man in our house. Why does he look exactly like Dad? Hester sighed, leaning against the doorframe. Your father didn't just build secure data networks, boys. He built the architecture for algorithmic physical mimicry. He designed a neural network that could perfectly replicate human digital behavior, voice patterns, texting habits, financial routines, biometric tells. It was supposed to be a high-level security countermeasure, a decoy to confuse state-sponsored hackers and data scrapers. She pointed to the smashed computer tower on the floor. 3 months ago, a private intelligence firm bought out one of his primary investors. They took his code, and they didn't want it for digital decoys. They put it into hardware, synthetic biological frames. They built physical copies of high-value targets. A robot? Leo asked, his eyes wide. Not a robot, Hester said sharply. A synthetic mimic, grown tissue over a titanium alloy chassis. It bleeds, it breathes, it sweats, but it doesn't feel, and it takes its instructions directly from the server your father was trying to shut down. I remembered the torn knuckles on the imposter at the laundromat, the gleam of chrome beneath the torn skin. They sent it to replace him, I said, to take over his life, access his accounts, his company, his clearance. Yes, Hester said, but Arthur figured it out. He locked the primary dataset in your basement and ran. Now, the mimic is stuck. It looks like him. It sounds like him. But without the data on that drive, it can't access his bank accounts, his client lists, or the backdoors he built into the firm's systems. It's just an empty shell wearing his face. So we just stay away, I said. We stay away, and it can't get what it wants. Hester shook her head slowly. You think they only built one? My breath caught. It's an algorithm, Hester said softly. It learns. It adapts. The one at your house is a localized model. It has Arthur's face, but the firm knows where you are. They tracked your phone to the laundromat. They're tracking you right now. Suddenly, the lights in the office flickered. The low, steady hum of the servers in the central cooling room cut out completely. The silence was deafening, heavy, and immediate. Hester pushed off the doorframe, reaching under her parka. She pulled out a heavy, matte black flashlight, gripping it tightly. They cut the main breaker, she whispered. Can they get in? I asked, pulling Leo behind the overturned oak desk. Not easily. The back door is deadbolted, and the front lobby has reinforced security glass. We waited in the dark. I strained my ears, listening for the sound of shattering glass or tearing metal. I expected a violent breach, like the hammer blows against the alleyway door. Instead, there was a soft, electronic beep from the front of the building. Beep, beep, beep. It was the front door keypad. Then came the heavy, mechanical clack of the main magnetic lock disengaging. Hester froze. That's impossible. I changed the lobby codes yesterday. It didn't break in, I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. It knows the new codes. How? Hester breathed, her eyes fixed on the dark hallway outside the office. Because it has Dad's memories, I said. Or it's tapped into something that does. Footsteps echoed on the linoleum in the lobby. Slow, deliberate steps. They weren't heavy or rushed. They were calm. Methodical. Arthur? A voice called out from the dark. It wasn't my dad's voice. It was a woman's voice. Smooth, calm, and chillingly familiar. Hester went entirely rigid. She slowly lowered the flashlight. No, Hester whispered, her voice cracking for the first time. The footsteps moved down the carpeted hallway, stopping just outside the office door. A beam of amber light swept into the room, illuminating the shredded papers and the smashed computer. The light settled on Hester. Standing in the doorway was a woman in a heavy black parka. She had sharp features, dark hair pulled back severely, and cold, assessing eyes. She looked exactly like Hester. The real Hester didn't scream. She didn't freeze. She just stepped forward and drove the heavy, matte black flashlight directly into the center of the imposter's face. There was a loud, sickening crack. The imposter stumbled backward into the hallway. Her nose caved in, but she didn't make a sound. No cry of pain. No gasp of shock. She just stood there in the amber light, her head tilted at a slightly broken angle. A thick, dark fluid began to leak down her chin. It wasn't red. It was a slick, iridescent black, like motor oil, mixed with ink. Move, Hester screamed, grabbing my jacket and throwing me toward the far side of the office. She slammed the heavy oak door shut and engaged the deadbolt just as something incredibly heavy slammed against the wood from the other side. The entire doorframe shuddered. Dust rained down from the ceiling tiles. Is that? I couldn't finish the sentence. My brain was misfiring, trying to process seeing two identical women in the same room. It's a localized network, Hester said, her chest heaving as she shoved Dad's overturned desk against the door. If they made one of Arthur, they made one of anyone with level 4 clearance. They need all our biometric keys to unlock the main architecture. Another crash against the door. The wood splintered near the hinges. We can't stay here, I said, grabbing Leo, who was completely catatonic, staring at the door. Hester didn't answer. She ran to the back wall of the office, the one where the drywall had been sawed open. She reached into the dark void between the studs and pulled a heavy metal lever I hadn't seen in the shadows. There was a deep pneumatic hiss, and a section of the floor beneath the bookshelf dropped down 2 inches, then slid to the right. A narrow, dark maintenance shaft was completely hidden under the floorboards. Arthur didn't trust anyone, Hester said, grabbing her flashlight. He leased the building next door under a shell company. This shaft connects to their sub-basement. Get in. I didn't hesitate. I pushed Leo down the narrow ladder into the absolute darkness, then followed him. The air was freezing, smelling of damp concrete and rust. Hester climbed down last, pulling the lever to slide the floor shut, right as the office door above us gave way with a deafening splintering of wood. We dropped into a dusty concrete tunnel barely tall enough to stand in. Hester flicked on her flashlight. The beam cut through thick webs and swirling dust. Keep moving, she ordered, pushing past us to take the lead. They have thermal optics. The floor is lined with lead, but if she figures out the release latch, she'll just drop down after us. We ran. The tunnel felt endless, our footsteps echoing off the curved walls. Leo was gripping my hand so tight my knuckles were completely numb, but he didn't cry. He was in survival mode now, completely silent, his eyes wide and vacant. We reached a heavy steel grate at the end of the tunnel. Hester kicked it open, and we spilled out into a massive, unlit warehouse. Towering shelves of PVC pipes, ceramic sinks, and industrial water heaters loomed over us like metal skeletons. We were inside the plumbing supply warehouse next door. Hester led us through the maze of inventory, weaving toward the loading docks at the back. A white commercial transit van was parked inside the bay, keys sitting on the front right tire. Hester grabbed them, unlocked the doors, and shoved us into the back. Stay down, she commanded, climbing into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life. The garage door rattled open on an automated track, and we tore out into the gray, freezing morning. Hester didn't turn on the headlights until we were 3 miles away, merging onto a desolate stretch of the interstate heading east. The back of the van was empty and freezing. I pulled Leo into my lap, wrapping my arms around him to share what little body heat I had left. My pajamas were stiff with frozen sweat. My teeth were chattering so hard they felt loose in my gums. Hester drove in silence for 20 minutes, checking the rearview mirror obsessively. "Where are we going?" I finally asked. My voice sounded thin and hollow in the cavernous metal box. "St. Paul," Hester said, her eyes fixed on the road. "To Jasper's apartment." "Who is Jasper?" "The lead systems architect. He works with Arthur. If they haven't compromised him yet, he's the only one who has the offline schematics for your house's security system. We need his override codes." "To do what?" "To get into your basement," she said flatly. My stomach turned over. No, I am not going back to that house. The thing that looks like my dad is there. The drive is there." Hester shot back, her tone completely devoid of sympathy. "The Mimic doesn't have it yet. That's why it wanted you. It needs your biometric signature to unlock the physical casing. If it rips the drive out without the code, the drive incinerates itself. Then let it," I yelled, the panic finally breaking through. "Let it incinerate. I don't care about the company. I don't care about the data. I just want my dad and my brother to be safe." Hester slammed on the brakes. The van skidded on a patch of black ice, fishtailing violently before she wrestled it back under control, pulling onto the snowy shoulder of the highway. The engine idled loudly. She turned around in her seat, glaring at me over the metal partition. "Listen to me," she said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "If that drive incinerates, the fail-safe triggers. The firm gets locked out of the localized network. Yes, but do you know what happens to the Mimics?" I stared at her, breathing hard. "They default to Protocol 0, she said. "Total asset liquidation. They stop trying to steal the data. They just kill the loose ends. If that drive burns, the thing in your house won't need you alive anymore. It will hunt you down, it will hunt this kid down, and it will walk into the ICU in Rochester and unplug your father's life support. And nobody will stop it, because it looks exactly like him." She turned back around and shifted the van into drive. "We need Jasper's codes. We go to your house. You unlock the drive, we format it, and we upload the containment virus Arthur built to shut the synthetic network down entirely. That is the only way you survive this week." I leaned back against the cold metal wall of the van. Leo buried his face in my neck, shaking silently. I looked at Hester's hands on the steering wheel. She was wearing thick leather gloves. When she had smashed the flashlight into the imposter's face, a jagged piece of the metal casing had sliced the back of her glove. Through the torn leather, I could see a deep cut on her hand. It was bleeding. Red blood. Bright, normal, human blood. I exhaled slowly, letting my head drop back against the metal paneling. Okay, she was real. For now. We reached Jasper's apartment complex in St. Paul just after 7 in the morning. It was a brutalist concrete high-rise surrounded by neglected snowbanks and dead trees. Hester parked a block away, leaving the engine running. "Wait here," she said, pulling a heavy wrench from a tool bag under the passenger seat. "No," I said, unbuckling Leo and grabbing his hand. "We aren't splitting up. I'm not sitting in a metal box waiting to see if you come back." Hester looked annoyed, but she didn't argue. She nodded once, and we climbed out into the biting wind. We took the stairs to the 4th floor. The fluorescent lights in the hallway flickered, casting long, jaundiced shadows against the peeling wallpaper. The air smelled of stale cigarette smoke and boiled cabbage. Hester stopped in front of apartment 4B. She didn't knock. She pressed her ear against the cheap composite wood, listening for a long time. Then, she raised her fist and rapped a complex rhythm on the door. 2 fast, 1 slow, 3 fast. Nothing happened. She did it again. We heard the deadbolt slide back. Then, the chain. The door opened 2 inches, revealing a sliver of a pale, terrified face. "Hester?" A man whispered. "Open the door, Jasper," she said. "They're rolling out the level 4s. Jasper unlatched the chain and pulled the door open, immediately backing away. He was a young guy, maybe 25, wearing a rumpled gray hoodie and sweatpants. He had dark circles under his eyes and looked like he hadn't slept in days. The apartment behind him was a disaster. Monitors were stacked on every flat surface, cables snaking across the floor like black vines. In the center of the room, a large duffel bag was half packed with clothes and hard drives. "I saw the network traffic an hour ago," Jasper said, his voice trembling. He paced frantically toward the window, peering out through a crack in the blinds. "The local loop in Eden Prairie pinged a biometric failure. Then the main server went dark. I thought you were dead." "I'm close to it," Hester said, stepping inside and locking the door behind us. "Arthur's kids. They got out of the house. The Arthur Mimic is stuck in the localized loop." Jasper stopped pacing and looked at us, his eyes fixed on me, then drifted down to Leo. He swallowed hard. "You brought them here?" he hissed, running a hand through his unwashed hair. "Are you out of your mind? If the Mimics are tracking them, you just led them to the only offline terminal left." I checked for trackers. "We ditched the kids' phones," Hester said calmly. "We need the schematics, Jasper. We need the physical bypass for the basement server." Jasper shook his head, backing away toward his duffel bag. No way. I'm out. I'm taking the analog drives and I'm going to Canada. I'm not dying for Arthur's mistake. It's not his mistake," I yelled, stepping forward. The anger flared up, hot and sudden, burning away the cold. "He built it to protect people. Your firm sold it out to a private intelligence company. It doesn't matter who sold what," Jasper snapped, his voice cracking. "The code is in the wild. The hardware is walking around in the suburbs. Do you have any idea what these things are? They aren't just robots. They're heuristic. They learn. They adapt. If you shoot one, the network instantly patches the tactical error, and the next one won't fall for it. You can't outsmart them, you can't outfight them, and you sure as hell can't reason with them." He grabbed his duffel bag and zipped it shut. "I have a cousin in Winnipeg. I'm going off the grid." Hester stepped into his path, blocking the door. She didn't raise the wrench, but she held it loosely by her side. "You don't make it to the border, Jasper," she said softly. "You know their operational radius. The second your passport scans, a Mimic wearing a Border Patrol uniform pulls you into a secondary screening room and snaps your neck." Jasper froze, his knuckles white on the duffel bag handles. "We format the primary drive, we upload the virus, the network collapses," Hester said. "It's the only way you get your life back." Jasper stared at her, breathing heavily. He looked at me, then at Leo, who was shivering slightly in the overheated apartment. He dropped the bag. "Fine," he whispered. "Fine." He walked over to a heavy steel safe bolted to the floor beneath his desk. He dialed a combination, pulled the heavy door open, and extracted a bulky, archaic-looking laptop. It looked like a military tough book from the early 2000s, encased in thick rubber and metal. "This is the offline master key," Jasper said, handing it to Hester. "It's hard-coded to Arthur's closed-loop system. You have to physically connect it to the server rack in the basement using an Ethernet cable. Once it's plugged in, the kid has to input his biometric clearance, fingerprint, and retinal scan on the laptop's interface. Then, you have a 90-second window to format the drive and deploy the virus before the localized network realizes what's happening and locks you out. Hester took the heavy laptop. Thank you. Don't thank me, Jasper said, his eyes hollow. The Arthur mimic is going to be standing right next to that server rack. It's not going to just let you plug this in. It will, if it thinks we're surrendering the data, Hester said. Jasper let out a dry, humorless laugh. You're going to lie to a machine that perfectly replicates human behavior? Good luck. He turned away, grabbing his duffel bag again. I'm leaving now. If you fail, the network will know I gave you the key. I need a head start. He walked past us, unlocked his front door, and stepped out into the hallway. I watched him go, feeling a strange pit of dread opening in my stomach. Not because he was leaving us, but because of the way he had looked at the heavy rubberized laptop in Hester's hands. It wasn't the look of a man handing over salvation. It was the look of a man handing over a loaded grenade with the pin pulled. Let's go, Hester said, shoving the laptop into her bag. We have to get to your house before noon. The mimic knows Arthur's routines. He always checked the server logs at midday. We walked back out into the freezing hallway. The drive back to Minneapolis was silent. The sky remained a flat, suffocating gray, threatening more snow. My mind raced, trying to formulate a plan. How were we supposed to get past the imposter in my house? How were we going to get Leo close enough to the server without the mimic grabbing him? We were 10 minutes away from my neighborhood when Hester's burner phone rang. It was a sharp, jarring trill that made all three of us jump. Hester didn't have her phone connected to the van's Bluetooth. She pulled it out of her pocket and looked at the screen. The number was restricted. She put it on speaker and laid it on the center console. Yeah, she said. Hester, the voice, sent a spike of pure ice straight into my heart. It was my father, not the flat, metallic voice from the phone call last night. It was his real voice. The warmth, the slight gravelly undertone, the familiar cadence. Arthur, Hester said. Her voice didn't waver. Where are you? I'm at the hospital, the voice said, sounding exhausted. Rochester. I just woke up. The doctors said I was in a crash. I leaned forward, my hands gripping the metal partition. Dad, I choked out. Chief? My dad's voice cracked. Oh, thank God. Are you and Leo okay? The police said you weren't at the house. We're okay, I said, tears instantly hot in my eyes. We're with Hester. We got away from the thing. Listen to me, Chief, my dad said, his voice dropping into a serious, urgent tone. You can't trust her. You can't trust Hester. Hester's hand tightened on the steering wheel, but she didn't say a word. What do you mean? I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. The firm didn't just compromise my project. The voice on the phone said, sounding breathless, like talking was taking a massive physical toll. They compromised the entire team. They built the Hester mimic 3 weeks ago. The real Hester is dead. Chief, they killed her in her apartment. The woman driving that van is a machine. She's taking you back to the house to unlock the drive for them. The air in the van seemed to evaporate. I looked at Hester's profile. Her face was completely expressionless. I looked down at her hands on the steering wheel. I looked at the torn leather glove. The blood was gone. Where the deep red cut had been 20 minutes ago, the skin was completely smooth, flawless, and whole. The synthetic tissue had repaired itself. Get out of the van, Chief. The voice of my father begged through the speaker. Get Leo and run. I didn't even have time to blink. Hester's hand whipped off the steering wheel and snatched the burner phone from the console. She didn't press end. She just squeezed. The plastic and glass crumpled with a sickening crunch, sparking briefly before dying completely. She tossed the mangled remains onto the passenger seat. Then her eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. The cold, assessing look was gone. There was nothing there at all. Just 2 glass marbles reflecting the gray highway. Clack. The heavy electronic locks on all 4 doors engaged simultaneously. She slammed her foot on the accelerator. The van's engine roared, the metal box rattling violently as we shot past 70 miles an hour on the icy interstate. I was thrown backward, sliding across the grooved metal floor, clutching Leo to my chest. What are you? I screamed, scrambling to get my feet under me. Hester didn't answer. She just drove, her face fixed forward, her posture terrifyingly rigid. Chief, Leo sobbed, burying his face in my coat. What's happening? Was that Dad? Keep your head down, I told him, my voice cracking. I looked wildly around the cavernous back of the van. It was a plumbing supply vehicle. There had to be something. Anything. In the dim light filtering through the grated partition, I saw a heavy canvas tool bag shoved into the corner, half buried under a coil of thick copper tubing. I crawled toward it, the van swaying sickeningly as Hester wove through the sparse morning traffic without using signals, taking turns with mathematically precise jerks of the wheel. I ripped the tool bag open. Pliers, measuring tape, PVC glue, and at the bottom, a massive cast iron pipe wrench. It weighed at least 10 pounds. I gripped the handle with both hands and stood up, bracing my shoulder against the vibrating wall. Hester was taking the exit for Eden Prairie. We were 10 minutes from my house, 10 minutes from the basement, 10 minutes from whatever fate Protocol Zero had in store for us once we unlocked that drive. I stepped up to the metal partition, separating the cab from the cargo area. It had a small square window covered in thick wire mesh. Through the mesh, I could see the back of Hester's head. I swung the wrench with everything I had. The iron head smashed into the wire mesh. The impact jarred my arms so hard I lost feeling in my elbows, but the mesh bowed outward. The glass behind it spiderwebbed. Hester didn't flinch. She didn't even turn her head. She just kept driving. I swung again, screaming with the effort. The glass shattered inward, showering the front cab with jagged cubes. The wire mesh tore loose on one side. I shoved the heavy end of the wrench through the gap, aiming blindly for the back of her head, her shoulder, the steering wheel, anything to make her stop. The iron struck her right shoulder with a sickening thud. A normal person would have screamed. A normal person's collarbone would have snapped in half. Hester's arm just jerked slightly. She reached over with her left hand, grabbed the iron head of the wrench, and pulled. The force was impossible. The wrench was ripped out of my grip so violently it tore the skin off my palms. She tossed the 10-pound tool onto the passenger seat like it was a plastic toy. The biometric fail-safe requires a heart rate. Hester's voice drifted back through the shattered window. It was the same flat, metallic rasp the mimic at my house had used. It requires blood pressure. Do not make me disable your limbs. I will drag you to the scanner unconscious if I have to. She took a sharp right turn, the tires squealing as we hit the suburban streets of my neighborhood. I knew these roads. We were 2 miles away. I fell back, staring at my bleeding hands. Leo was curled into a tight ball against the back doors, hyperventilating. The back doors. I scrambled over to them. There was no internal handle on commercial cargo doors, just a recessed lock cylinder. But this was an older van. The side sliding door. I threw myself at the side door. There was a manual override latch covered by a red plastic housing. I kicked the plastic housing, shattering it, and grabbed the metal lever beneath. Leo, come here. I yelled over the roar of the road. He crawled toward me, his eyes wide with absolute terror. Wrap your arms around around my neck, I commanded. Do not let go. When this door opens, we are going to jump. It's going to hurt, but you have to hold on to me. He nodded frantically, scrambling up my back and locking his arms around my throat. He felt so light, so fragile. If we hit the pavement wrong, we were both dead. But we were dead anyway if we made it to that basement. I looked out the small rear window. We were turning onto Elm Street, a mile out. The van was slowing down to navigate the snow-packed residential curves, dropping to maybe 30 miles an hour. Still incredibly dangerous, but the snowbanks on the side of the road were plowed high. 4 feet of packed powder. I gripped the metal lever. I waited for a sharp left turn, knowing the centrifugal force would help throw the heavy sliding door open. The van swerved left. I pulled the latch and shoved my shoulder against the door. The wind caught it. The heavy steel door slid backward on its track with a deafening scrape, slamming open. The freezing air rushed in, sucking the breath from my lungs. The road blurred beneath us, a ribbon of gray asphalt and dirty white ice. Hold on, I screamed. I didn't jump out. I leaped as far horizontally into the snowbank as I could, turning my body mid-air to ensure my back and shoulder took the impact, keeping Leo shielded on my chest. We hit the snowbank like a meteor. The impact knocked the air completely out of me. The world became a violent, blinding tumble of white, gray, and agonizing pain. We rolled, flipping head over heels over the crest of the plowed snow, crashing through a frozen hedge, and finally slamming to a halt in someone's front yard. I lay there on my back, staring up at the bruised purple sky, my ears ringing with a high, sustained whine. My left shoulder was screaming in agony. I couldn't breathe. Chief, a small voice whimpered. Chief, please, I gasped, the freezing air finally punching its way into my lungs. I rolled over onto my side. Leo was tangled in my coat, covered in snow, but he was moving. There was a scrape across his cheek, welling with bright red blood, but his eyes were focused. I'm okay, I wheezed, forcing myself to sit up. Every muscle in my body felt like it had been hit with a hammer. I'm okay. I looked back toward the street. The van hadn't stopped. It had kept going, its taillights disappearing around the bend, heading straight for my house. She didn't stop because she couldn't. Protocol 0. The local network was waiting for the master key. She had the laptop. She was going to link up with the Arthur Mimic. They didn't have us, though. They couldn't open it. Then why did they keep going? A horrifying thought hit me, freezing the blood in my veins. The biometric fail-safe requires his physical presence, or his direct bloodline. Or your brother, Hester had said. Me, or Leo. But there was another bloodline. The primary one. My dad. I'm at the hospital. Rochester. I just woke up. If they couldn't get us to unlock it, they would go to the source. The Arthur Mimic didn't need to stay at the house if it had the offline master key. It could leave. It could drive to Rochester. It could walk right into that hospital, looking exactly like the man lying in the bed, grab him by his bruised, battered hand, and force his thumb onto the scanner. I dragged myself to my feet, pulling Leo up with me. My left arm hung uselessly at my side, the shoulder definitely dislocated. I gritted my teeth against the nausea washing over me. We were standing in the front yard of the Hendersons, 3 blocks from our house. Their driveway was empty. No cars, no help. We have to go back, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Leo stared at me in horror. Are you crazy? They'll kill us. If they leave with that laptop, they're going to kill Dad, I said, swaying slightly in the cold wind. They're going to Rochester. We have to destroy the server before they get the data out. We have to burn it down. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I had one good arm, a terrified 10-year-old, and 0 weapons. We were walking back into a house occupied by 2 synthetic killing machines. But my dad had built this trap for a reason. He had built the house to be a fortress. We stayed off the streets, cutting through backyards, vaulting over low fences, trudging through knee-deep snow. Every step sent a jolt of white-hot pain through my collarbone. 10 minutes later, we crouched behind the thick oak tree in our own backyard. The white transit van was parked in our driveway, right behind Dad's stationary truck. The back doors were wide open. The house was completely silent. The kitchen lights were off now. The basement windows, small, frosted glass rectangles near the ground, glowed with a faint, pulsing blue light. They were down there. Stay here, I whispered to Leo, pushing him down into the hollow behind the tree roots. Do not move. Do not make a sound. Chief, don't, he pleaded, his small hands grabbing my good arm. I'm just going to look. I'll be right back. I detached myself from his grip and crept across the snow toward the house. I kept low, moving along the brick foundation until I reached one of the frosted basement windows. It was slightly ajar, propped open maybe half an inch to let the server heat vent out. I pressed my ear against the crack. Override codes accepted. Hester's voice drifted up, echoing slightly off the concrete walls. Analog key verified. Standing by for biometric input. He lied to me, the Arthur Mimic replied. It was perfectly my dad's voice. Frustrated, heavy, he didn't wake up. The clinic just updated the server logs. Arthur Pendleton's heart stopped 3 minutes ago. He's dead. I stopped breathing. The world tilted on its axis, spinning sickeningly. Dead. Then, the primary biometric is void, Hester said, her voice devoid of any emotion. Protocol 0. Liquidate the secondary targets. They jumped from the transport, the Arthur Mimic said. Calculate their trajectory based on the speed and location of the drop. Calculating. They are within a 1-mile radius. I am initiating local sweep. Heavy footsteps moved toward the basement stairs. I scrambled backward, away from the window, the snow crunching loudly under my boots. I had to get to Leo. We had to run. They were coming outside. I turned and sprinted toward the oak tree, ignoring the blinding pain in my shoulder. Leo, I hissed, sliding into the hollow behind the roots. We have to go. Now, I reached out to grab his jacket. My hand closed around empty air. The hollow was empty. I froze, staring at the indentation in the snow where he had just been sitting. There were footprints, small, panicked footprints leading away from the tree, heading toward the side gate of the yard, and right beside them, overlapping his tiny boot prints, were the deep, heavy, perfectly spaced strides of someone who had walked up behind him in absolute silence. I didn't scream. I didn't even breathe. I just stared at the overlapping impressions in the snow, the heavy treads cutting right through the center of Leo's frantic tiny footprints. They led straight back to the house, straight to the frosted storm doors of the basement, which now stood wide open, gaping like a black throat in the foundation. My left arm throbbed in time with my racing heart. Every beat sent a sickening wave of heat through my dislocated shoulder, making my vision swim. But I couldn't pass out. Not now. I dragged my boots through the snow, following the track. The cold was numbing my legs, which was probably a blessing. I reached the concrete steps leading down into the basement and pressed my back against the icy brick wall. I could hear the low, heavy hum of the server rack inside. Above it, the sound of a keyboard clacking with impossible rhythmic speed. Biometric scanner is online, the Hester Mimic's voice said. It sounded completely human, yet utterly devoid of humanity. Hold the secondary target steady. I'm not doing it, Leo's voice cracked, thick with tears. Let me go. Your cooperation is not required for the scan, the Arthur mimic replied. My dad's voice, calm, reasonable. It made my stomach violently turn. I just need your retina and your thumb, Leo. It'll be over in a second. I leaned around the doorframe. The basement was lit only by the pulsing blue LEDs of the massive server rack Dad had built into the far wall. The Hester mimic was standing at a metal utility cart, typing on Jasper's heavy, rubberized tough book. A thick Ethernet cable ran from the laptop directly into the core of the server. The Arthur mimic was standing right in front of the biometric panel. He had Leo by the back of his jacket, lifting him effortlessly off the floor with one hand. Leo was kicking and thrashing, but the mimic didn't even sway. It was like watching a child fight a stone pillar. Jasper had said we had a 90-second window to upload the virus once the biometric lock was cleared, but the Hester mimic was standing right there. If the scan went through, she would just extract the data and trigger Protocol 0. She would kill Leo the second the progress bar hit 100%. I couldn't fight them. I had one arm and zero strength left, but my dad had built this system. He had spent months down here, running drills, writing code, preparing for exactly this. The fail-safe requires his physical presence, or his direct bloodline. I stepped out of the shadows and walked through the open storm doors. Let him go, I said. The Hester mimic's head snapped toward me. The Arthur mimic slowly turned, still holding Leo suspended in the air. Seeing his face, my dad's face, under the blue server lights was a fresh nightmare. The graying beard, the tired lines around the eyes. It was perfect, but he was standing perfectly balanced on two good ankles. Chief, Leo sobbed. Put him down, I said, stepping into the center of the room. My voice was shaking, but I forced myself to keep walking forward. You need a stable heart rate and blood pressure for the scan. He's panicking. His vitals are erratic. The scanner will reject it. You know it will. The Arthur mimic tilted its head. It processed the logic in a fraction of a second. The biometric sensors were highly sensitive to forced compliance. My dad designed them to lock out if they detected a struggle or elevated cortisol levels indicating a hostage situation. Your vitals are also elevated, the mimic said. I can control mine, I lied. He's 10. He can't. Let him go, and I'll put my hand on the glass. I'll open it for you. The Arthur mimic looked at the Hester mimic. She didn't nod, but some silent data exchange happened between them. The Arthur mimic released its grip. Leo dropped to the concrete floor, coughing and scrambling backward until he hit the stairs. Go, I told him, not taking my eyes off the thing wearing my dad's face. Run to the Henderson's house. Tell them to call the police. Don't stop. Leo hesitated, looking at my limp left arm. Then he turned and scrambled up the stairs into the snow. The mimics didn't try to stop him. Protocol 0 hadn't been initiated yet. I was the key, and I was right here. Step forward, the Arthur mimic said. I walked up to the server rack. The heat pouring off the machines was intense. The biometric panel was a thick square of illuminated glass next to a retinal lens. To my left, the Hester mimic stood over Jasper's laptop. The screen was a wall of green text, waiting for the physical lock to disengage. Place your right thumb on the glass, the Arthur mimic instructed. Look directly into the lens. I raised my right hand. It was bruised and scraped raw from the iron wrench, but my thumb was intact. I pressed it against the glass. A red laser swept across my skin. Heart rate detected. Blood pressure within acceptable parameters. I leaned forward and looked into the lens. A soft beep echoed through the basement. The massive steel locking bars on the front of the server rack disengaged with a heavy, satisfying clack. The physical barrier was down. The Hester mimic's hands instantly flew across the keyboard of the tough book, initiating the data transfer. She wasn't typing the virus sequence Jasper had given us. She was bypassing the encryption, preparing to rip the localized network keys right out of the drive. I had 90 seconds. I didn't try to fight the Arthur mimic. I knew I couldn't move him. Instead, I threw my entire body weight to the left, slamming my right shoulder into the Hester mimic's chest. It was like hitting a brick wall. The impact jarred my teeth, but it was just enough to knock her off balance. She stumbled backward, away from the utility cart. I grabbed the heavy, rubberized laptop with my good hand. Asset non-compliant, the Arthur mimic stated flatly. Its hand clamped down on the back of my neck. The grip was paralyzing, crushing the nerves at the base of my skull. It slammed me face first onto the metal utility cart. The edge of the laptop bit into my ribs, initiating physical suppression, the mimic said. I couldn't breathe. Black spots danced in my vision. The machine was going to snap my spine. I looked down at the keyboard. Jasper's terminal window was open. The script for the containment virus was preloaded, waiting for the execution command. I just had to hit enter. The Hester mimic stepped forward, raising a hand to rip the Ethernet cable out of the laptop. If she disconnected it, the virus wouldn't deploy. The data would be theirs. My right arm was pinned under my chest. My left arm was a dead, dislocated weight. I screamed, twisting my head just enough to smash my forehead directly into the enter key. The laptop chimed, deploying payload. The Hester mimic froze, her hand inches from the cable. The crushing pressure on the back of my neck didn't vanish, but it locked in place. The Arthur mimic's fingers went entirely rigid. A terrible, high-pitched screech began to emanate from the server rack. The blue LEDs flashed violently, turning a blinding, angry red. The virus Jasper had written wasn't just a software wipe. It was a localized network override. It flooded the mimic's communication channels with garbage data, forcing their synthetic processors into an endless reboot loop. The Hester mimic twitched, her head jerked to the side, her eyes rolling back to expose pure white synthetic sclera. A thick line of the black fluid I had seen before began to leak from her nose. She took one step backward, her knee joint locking backward with a loud snap, and collapsed onto the concrete floor like a dropped marionette. The Arthur mimic was still standing over me. The grip on my neck was iron tight, locked in the dead man's hold of a seizing machine. Chief. Leo came tearing down the basement stairs. He hadn't gone to the neighbors. He had waited in the snow. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed the heavy fire extinguisher Dad kept mounted by the stairs, dragged it across the floor, and swung the heavy metal cylinder directly into the back of the Arthur mimic's knees. The titanium alloy didn't break, but the joint mechanism was already seizing from the virus. The impact forced the leg to buckle. The mimic collapsed backward. Its hand was torn from my neck, leaving deep bruised indents in my skin. It hit the floor heavily, its face locked in an empty, paralyzed stare, staring up at the basement ceiling. I slid off the cart and collapsed onto my knees, gasping for air. Behind me, the server rack began to smoke. The fans whined in a death spiral. Dad's secondary fail-safe. With the physical locks open and a catastrophic network failure detected, the system was incinerating the physical drive. The smell of melting plastic and ozone filled the basement. Is it dead? Leo whispered, dropping the fire extinguisher. He was staring at the flawless face of our father, now rigid and leaking black fluid from the tear ducts. It was never alive, I wheezed. I reached out with my good arm and pulled my brother into my chest. He He was freezing, trembling violently, but he was here. We were both here. The servers popped loudly, a shower of sparks raining down behind the glass doors as the hard drives literally melted themselves into slag. The data was gone. The mimics were bricked. The local network was permanently severed. I awkwardly dug my hand into the pocket of my soaked jacket. I pulled out the burner phone Hester had dropped in the van before she crushed her own. The screen was cracked, but it still had power. I dialed 911. I told them there had been an attack at our address. Then, my hands shaking so badly I could barely press the numbers, I dialed the Mayo Clinic in Rochester. Surgical IQ. A nurse answered. Arthur Pendleton. I choked out. Is he still there? There was a long pause, accompanied by the clicking of a keyboard. Every second felt like an hour. Mr. Pendleton is stable, sweetheart, the nurse said gently. His vitals improved significantly over the last hour. The swelling in his brain is receding. We're hoping to begin waking him up from the coma by tomorrow. I closed my eyes. The tears finally spilled over, hot and heavy, tracking through the dirt and dried blood on my face. Thank you, I whispered, and hung up. I looked at Leo. He was staring at the phone, waiting for the verdict. Dad's alive, I told him. He's alive. Leo buried his face in my coat and finally started to cry out loud. We didn't stay in the basement. The smoke was getting thick, and I didn't want to spend another second looking at the empty shell on the floor. I grabbed Jasper's laptop, the only evidence we had left, and we walked slowly up the stairs into the biting Minnesota morning. The sun was finally breaking through the heavy gray clouds, casting a pale, blinding light across the suburban snowbanks. The neighborhood was dead quiet, save for the distant, approaching wail of police sirens. We sat down together on the frozen steps of our back porch, shivering in the cold, waiting for them to arrive.